All right, we are live. Maybe, hopefully. I don't know. We'll find out right now. Yes, I am Ron Tucker, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I am going to be posting some more unboxings in the future. Maybe some writing videos, some writing tips, although I really don't like giving out kind of advice like that stuff. But if it's if anybody wants them, then I'll post that. But what I am also going to be doing is going to be posting. Oh, can't get these headphones on right. I'm going to be uploading these videos called Just a Writer. It's kind of a play off of a little hashtag going around. Just a Writer show that will be interviewing hopefully upcoming um, writers and writers slash artists, anybody who is pretty much kind of in a creative endeavor to create either a novel or a comic book. Probably mostly comic books because not comic books are a graphic medium, and I want to kind of get into the mindset of a writer when they're writing for an artist or for themselves if they are both writing and creating the book in question. All right, so let's go to this screen real quick here. And what I will do is share a little bit about myself. Like I said, I am Ron Tucker. I write comic books and I write novels. This is my website right here. My main novel series is High School Sidekick. It is 4 books and it takes you basically on the journey of my main protagonist, Robbie Garcia, and he is a sidekick to one of the biggest superheroes in the world, and he basically has to come to terms with, um, those two halves of living as a sidekick and being a superhero in that world, but also having to deal with normal everyday life, going to school, being a teenager, and so that's what really that series is all about. This is let's go to here what I'm doing. This is the main page, but here is the page that shows each different book in the series. Freshman Sidekick kicks it off, and then it's with Trial by Fire. The third book is Riptide, and the last book focuses on his graduation year, graduation, and it all comes to a head right in there. Go to right here. Let me check here real quick. This is actually my first time. Um, I don't know if you can hear that. I don't know if that's going to go through, but do that. This is my first time running a StreamYard stream. So what I want to do, like I said, I want to try to interview other creators, but I figured I'd better just try it out on myself. That's why this is called the pilot episode. Try this on myself. Try to work out some of the bugs, some of the kinks that go along the way of trying to figure out how to run a stream while at the same time trying to interview somebody. Hopefully, it might be a little bit easier when I'm trying to interview somebody else as opposed to trying to interview me. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. So let's get into the questions, shall we? These are the type of things that hopefully I will be able to interview other people in the beginning. But let's go into first. How did you first get into comic books? In my case, I like to. I got into comic strips first. So I got into Calvin and Hobbes. Got into uh, the Peanuts, Garfield, and all of those, Sunday strips and newspaper strips that were really popular before newspapers started dying. So that's kind of how I got into that. I knew comic books existed, but I didn't really get into them. I think what I really first started realizing they existed and they were something I could go out and find a shop that sold them was right around the Image boom area. Wildcats came out as a cartoon. I didn't know about it at the time as a comic book, but when it came out as a cartoon, I was like, oh wow. And then I discovered everybody else, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, all those guys. So yeah, that's kind of how I came into comic books. I didn't really stick around though, because I was still kind of focused on comic strips, and then I kind of wanted to do animation. And then I kind of came back around right around the time of like the Batman Hush storyline with Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee. So that's kind of how I got into comic books, and just found out about them and really dove in headfirst as a fan of reading them. All right, and the next question would be, what did you want to be an artist first, since this is a visual medium? A lot of writers actually start out wanting to be a artist, and obviously, yes, I did want to be an artist. The John Romita Jr. is one of my favorite artists, along with Jim Lee, a few others, Sergio Aragonés, Stan Sakai. Those are some of my favorite cartoonists. And so, and I am working on a comic book uh, story. It's a zany wrestling, which we'll get into in a minute. But yeah, that's what I wanted to start off with. I wanted to be a comic book artist, like so many other writers. What made you decide to take the jump from just reading comics to now creating them? And in my case, I wanted to tell stories. Like and I still want to tell stories. I have so many different stories that I want to get out of my system and that I want to get on the page. When I started reading them, the imagination just expounded. And so that's what I kind of got into it. I was like, oh wait, I can actually do this. Other people are doing this, and I can do this too. And yeah, it was pretty cool. That's what made me want to say, like, oh, okay, I don't want to just read these. I want to write, and I want to draw, and I wanted to create these fantastic worlds. All right. So as far as my comic strip goes, it is called Madcap Wrestling. That is still in the early stages right now. So we'll get into the process part of this video, or process part of this interview, in just a little bit. But as you can see right here, I pulled this up because this is my other main thing. I'm currently working on a new superhero novel series called Hood. It kind of is a mashup between Batman and Green Arrow, but it's kind of where Batman has existed for 20 years. And so my basic tagline is, what if Batman existed? Dick Grayson was his ward, but never became Robin, and just lived up, became a normal, um, rich kid. And then Batman dies by, some criminal. And that's when Dick Grayson learns and discovers, whoa, Bruce Wayne was actually Batman. That's kind of what my story is about. The son finds out his father has had this vigilante crusade on the city, trying to rid the city of evil criminals for 20 years, and now he's like, oh whoa, and then all of this is thrown in his lap. So that's the story I'm working on at the moment. First book will be seeing publication later on this year, but this is the main story that I had been working on. Freshman Sidekick, like I said, stars Robbie Garcia. Starts with him in freshman year, and then moves. Each book successfully moves up sophomore year, junior year, and then senior year. And it's a really a mix between that Spider-Man and Smallville type stories of kid with superpowers and responsibility on that end, but at the same time trying to live life as a teenager, all the things that come along with being a teenager and trying to get through high school. So that is what my main story was in the past. The idea came from this because I did want to know that kind of coming of age teenager Peter Parker, Clark Kent in high school with powers, but still having to deal with all the things that a normal teenager does, but at the same time having to work with superheroes and stop supervillains. All right. So as far as process goes, my process. What is the process? Is it full script? Is it outline? Do you go about creating it with an artist, or in my case, how do I go about that? I kind of work on an outline. What I have here is my iPad, and what I'll do is show you kind of how I outline this story I'm working on right now, which, like I said, is called Madcap Wrestling. So I'm working in Procreate. Let's see if I can show you this here. I'll go full screen right here. So what I'm doing here is these are the wrestlers, um, and you can see I have different columns here. These are all a bunch of different scenes, and it's just a real loose outline, real loose plot of what I want to have happen for maybe about the first 20 to 30 pages. This I thought was going to be a quick story, but it's probably going to take a lot longer. And yeah, I just kind of work at this outline. So what I've done is pulling right here. So my main character's name is Max Power, and you can kind of see it broke it down with the lines there, about where what happens in this scene, what happened in this scene, what happened in this scene. next scene down. And it's just really loose, like plot outline points, bullet points, really. And that's how I've kind of outlined my scenes. And then what I'll do is I'll take that little outline, little bullet points of maybe like 3 to 5 sentences, maybe. And then I'll go back into a scene and then I'll rough it all out right there where it's like, okay, got 5 panels on this page, and I don't really count those as I'm outlining. But what I do is once I get into the thumbnail and I get into the sketching part of the page, that is when you know, I figure out, okay, how many panels is this going to be, how many beats are going to be needed in between the two characters talking or whatever else is going on in that scene. All right. Go back to this. Nope, not that one. All right, next question is, since comics is a visual medium, does that play into your process when you are writing? Do you think of a specific thing you should do? Do you think of a specific thing you should do or shouldn't do? That as far as when the artist is going to have to draw it, does that come into play? And in my case, not really. I've tried to do that in the past with other stories I've wanted to tell, but it doesn't really come out right. So in my case, I kind of just have to let it go. I have to think about what works best for the story. If a story like in my Madcap Wrestling comic that I'm working on, I'm right now outlining a scene where my main character is going to have his first wrestling match. And in that story or in that scene, they have to come out. If you know pro wrestling, they have to come out. There's a crowd there. They're going to be cheering them on. And there's gonna be a big scene with all kinds of fans in attendance, and it's gonna be a real pain to draw. But, um, that's what the scene calls for. If I just have it focused on one little square of him coming out, it doesn't really have the same effect as if it shows, Max coming out from the backstage area and shows the whole crowd there ready to cheer on the new wrestler in the company. So, yeah, you have to really, in my opinion, you have to just go with what the scene calls for. Don't try to make it out to be less or more, just for what the scene calls for. And if it's something, even as it will be a problem for myself to draw in the future, then maybe I'll think about maybe I can scale it back a little bit or change it to some type of different camera angle. But in the beginning, I always just go off, okay, this is what the scene calls for, so this is what it's going to be. All right. So, as far as characters go, when you're writing them, are you conscious of their voice? Do you have a process for finding a character's voice? When I am writing my characters, I'm not conscious of who they are right now because when the way I write, I like the loose plot line I showed you or the loose outline I showed you from my comic strip. That's kind of similar to how I work when I'm creating my novels. I work on a very, very, very loose outline. I don't have a real detailed 2,000, 5,000 word structure of what's going to happen in the scenes, who my characters are. I kind of discover them as I'm writing. When it came to my book, Freshman Sidekick, he is. I didn't know he was going to be a freshman at the time. I started with oh, what if he's in high school? And at first, when I started on this, he um he was going to be, I was going to make him a junior, and then I got about 2 to 3 chapters in on the book, and I was like, okay, well, if he's a junior, and I had a few other stories, I knew the second story I wanted him to fight a supervillain that had fire powers. But then at the same time, I knew something big was going to happen in graduation. I didn't know it was going to be graduation time. I thought it might have been a couple years after he graduated school. So when I got about 2 to 3 chapters in on high school sidekick, freshman sidekick, I thought, oh, wait a minute, you know what? This could work when he's out of high school, but I kind of felt like the character needed to grow all through high school. So I thought, okay, well, let me edit a few things in those first few chapters I had. And then what I had to do was um, go back in, and I was like, okay, so now he's in freshman year, and that kind of built on the story from that point forward. So I didn't really have the voice of that character. I knew who he was. I kind of knew the power. I knew the power that I wanted him to have, but it kind of progressed. And then by the time the second book came around, that's when I knew the first book is always the hardest for me because I'm still learning who these characters are and what they're going to do. But by the time that second book comes around, okay, this character did this in book one. So in book two, what would they do? Would they do this? Would they say this? Would they act this way? I kind of know a little bit better, not totally, because that's still something that I'm learning as I go along and I write this character. But I have those first stepping stones. So by the time book two comes, there's that. And then by the time book three comes, there's that. And then the time book four, okay, now I really know who this character is. I know what he'd say. I know what he'd do. I know how he'd act. Let's see, do you have a character voices? Okay, the next question is when you're creating a new script or an idea, do you have to focus on the character? Do you focus first on the character, or do you focus on a theme, or do you focus on a story, or what kind of part of what you're creating do you focus on first? And in my case, I always focus on the story first. There's always a story that's going to be first. I'll take these off for right now since I don't really need these, I guess. There's always a story that I'm going to be focusing on first. Again, when I go back to my novel, High School Sidekick, the story was okay, this kid has powers. He becomes the sidekick for a big superhero, and he has to deal with all the drama, all the troubles that comes from being a teenager in high school. Go. And that's kind of how I dealt with High School Sidekick. The story came first. He had powers. He had to deal with being a sidekick to a superhero and having a life in high school with his best friend and having a girlfriend and all this other drama stuff. So when my new book comes out, Hood, that's the story again. He's this guy that's just graduated college, and he's a rich guy. He's lived with a silver spoon his whole life. And now all of a sudden, he just discovered that his dad was Hood, the vigilante hero of the city, and just died. Now he has all this baggage that he has to deal with. Like, he's mad that his dad died, and he's stuck. Now they're screaming outside the door. He's mad that his dad died, but at the same time, he has this baggage of like, okay, well, his dad was this vigilante that was almost like an urban legend, and like some people believed he existed in the city, but the rich parts of the city thought he was an urban legend. The bad side of the city thought he was like some boogeyman. He has all this stuff. He has the all this weight on his shoulders that he wants to find justice for who killed his dad. That's kind of the basis of that story, and that's what I started with. And then from there, like I did with High School Sidekick, it grows, and I'll figure out who the character is as the story progresses. All right, next question is going to be, so hold on one second. All right, next question is going to be, so when you send your script to the artist, how are any changes handled if changes are necessary? Are there many, like, if do you have to add more panels? Is that something you consider? In my case, like I said, I've gone over it. I kind of lay it out on the front of the page. I don't really have an answer for this one because since I am creating it myself, if I think one more panel or one less panel will be beneficial, then I'll just add it in. But yeah, that is a good question because a lot of people aren't sure. They'll send off a script to an artist and they'll be like, okay, 5 panels, this happened, boom, 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 boom. And they get it back and it's like a splash page or it's like 10 panels. And sometimes that doesn't quite, excuse me, that doesn't quite just or go with what the story calls for. So it'll be interesting to find out with other artists and other writers who create, or other writers slash artists, how they deal with that type of situation. Okay, the next part of this interview segment is going to be dealing with crowdfunding. I haven't crowdfunded anything yet. What I want to do in the future is I want to crowdfund um, a special edition hardcover of a novel, but I also want to crowdfund um, the Audible editions of High School Sidekicks. They are in ebook and paperback versions right now, but you can't get them as a audiobook, and that's what I really wanna do because I know a lot of people really listen to audiobooks. So that's gonna be probably my first crowdfunding campaign. Eventually, I'll get to the special edition hardcover, and then later on, way down the line for Madcap Wrestling, I'll do maybe a crowdfunding for that to get a, physical copy of that. But as far as crowdfunding campaigns, I do want to interview and talk to other people and find out what the process is like, what they've learned, what they would have liked to know beforehand, or what kind of advice they would give to other people who may be just starting out on their first crowdfunding campaign. All right. And now, see, these interviews are probably going to be about 30 minutes or so. So, not that long unless we get into real different topics and the discussion goes on for longer. But baseline, maybe around 30 minutes or so. And then what we are going to see here is in the final part. Let's see, what are we doing here? The final part of this Just a Writer interview, or Just a Writer show, whatever. I'm still figuring out how to work this. Rapid fire questions. We're going to do rapid fire questions.
And here we go.
All right. So, rapid fire questions. We are favorite comic book story or favorite story of all time. My favorite comic book story, one of my all-time favorites is World War Hulk. I love that story. That was really cool. John Romita Jr. I love his artwork. And then maybe a full longer story that's wide scope is Stan Sakai's Usagi Yojimbo. That's a great that's a great story. Black and white, pen and ink story of a samurai Ronin, I guess would be the more appropriate term, rabbit, and his quest to adventures throughout line has been going on for, man, I don't even know, a couple hundred issues, maybe more, a few less. I don't know. It's been going on for a very long time though. Usagi Yojimbo. If you've never seen that, please check it out. Love that cartoonist. Love that story. I guess that was a really bad first question or first answer for rapid. These are going to be rapid fire, right? All right. Favorite writer: Philip K. Dick and Dean Koontz. Favorite artists: I've already said John Romita Jr., Stan Sakai, Jim Lee, Sergio Aragonis. Those are the ones that first come to mind. Favorite comic book character: I am a big Aquaman fan. I know he gets a lot of hate and a lot of made fun of, but Aquaman's awesome. All right. Least favorite comic book character would have to be any like space hero. No, Hawkman. I'm not a fan. Like, he looks kind of cool, but he doesn't. What? He has wings and he's strong. He's an alien. I don't know. Never got into Hawkman. Most overrated comic book character. Most overrated would have to be Wolverine. Wolverine he's awesome. He's best there is at what he does, I guess. But he's like, okay, he has super healing powers, but he's just cool, I guess, and I think he's overrated. Least or most underrated comic book character. Underrated. Let's go with. It's a tough one. Plastic Man. Plastic Man would probably be the most underrated. Like, yeah, it's a pretty interesting superpower, but I bet he could do a lot of different things like that. But he's always just, the comic relief. Um, if you were asked to take over one character from any company from any medium right now, who would it be? Oh, this is a tough one. Let's go with any comic book character. I would say, like, again, the water characters are like Aquaman or Namor. I have a cool anti-hero or anti-hero story for Namor. idea that I have, and probably never get to do it on that. So I have it as my own character that I have an idea for. So one of those two. And last one will be what's next. As I've said, High School Sidekick was what I worked on now or in the past. I have these 4 books out. You can get them on Amazon. Let's see. You can get them on Amazon, on Kobo, on Barnes and Nobles, on Apple Books. You can get them all over the places. What I'm working on next, like I said, I'm working on Madcap Wrestling, which is my zany, out there uh, pro wrestling story. It's going to have, you know, if you like pro wrestling and you like things like superhero powers, like it's basically WWE meets Dragon Ball. That's what it is. And then like I said, I'm working on Hood. Hood is my vigilante superhero that I will be publishing next. And I will be putting up a Patreon soon where you can support and join the fun and see all the chapters before they get published. You can get behind the scenes notes and different character studies and future short stories that I will be writing, because even though Hood is the main next project I'm working on, I am working on a bunch of other stuff. So that is what is next for me. All right, we are coming up on 30 minutes now. And yeah, so that is Just a Writer, featuring me, Ron Tucker, in this pilot episode. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a like and a subscribe down below. And I will be hopefully interviewing and talking to some more creators, some more writers in the future, writers and artists. And yeah, if you want to be on the show and talk about your process and that type of stuff, if that sounds interesting to you and you don't mind minimal views right now, because I probably won't have very many views if you're seeing this right now at the beginning of 2022, hit me up. I'm at rontucker.com or rontuckerwrites.com, and I'm also there on Instagram and Twitter. You can DM me, Ron Tucker Writes. And yeah, so until next time, again, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.